Finally, a 10-year-long study confirms no link between playing violent video games as early as 10 years old and aggressive behavior later in life. Now, this is something we've all known forever, but now we finally have the study to prove it, although unfortunately it's long after we've already defeated these censors. So I would actually suggest this. Before it becomes a bigger issue, start another 10-year study on sexual content in games. And do Lolly and Shota as well while you're at it. Because the same people who were like, what? Video games don't make people violent? That doesn't make sense. Now they're like, oh, well, of course these hentai games turn people into rapists. I mean, why wouldn't they? So before they finally succeed in banning everything, before the Puritans destroy everything, have the study ready to go to shove in their fucking faces. Because imagine how much easier our fight against the anti-violence censors would have been if we had an actual study to point to back then. We're going to need this same thing done with sexual content of all kinds. So a 10-year longitudinal study published by the Journal of Cyber Psychology, Behavior, and Social Networking, which, you can go to the report itself, but I'll be honest, man, fucking academic papers are boring as shit. So I'm not going to read that. But you guys know where it is if you want to find it. On a group of early adolescents from as young as 10 years old, investigated how playing violent video games at an early age would translate into adulthood behavior up to 23 years of age. Titled Growing Up with Grand Theft Auto, a 10-year study of longitudinal growth of violent video game play in adolescence. So there's I highlighted it. There's the name of the study itself if you want to look it up. It's on the internet, free for everyone to read. The study found no correlation between growing up playing video games and increased levels of aggression 10 years later. This particular study utilized a more contemporary approach for analyzing data, known as a person-centered approach. Traditional studies use a variable-centered approach, whereas the researchers treat each variable or characteristic as related to each other variable. An example would be that exercising is related to reduced incidence of heart disease. This has been particularly valuable when comparing groups. In person-centered approach, research combines various algorithms across various variables to determine how these variables compare among individuals. This approach provides a more accurate depiction of how variables relate to the individual. If you thought that was a mouthful and you're already glazing over, the study is more of that, honestly. So read it if you want, but I really just brought this up not to point out what we've already known for decades, but I'm just calling now, guys, the two remaining people in academia who aren't complete cucked pieces of shit just yet. Can you please do a study on sexual content in games next? Because we really need to shut these Puritans the fuck up. And if we had a legit study to do that, that would be so fucking helpful. And in fact, if we could predict what the next moral outrage is, we could get that out of the way too. A little bit of an unknown history lesson. One of the main reasons that the last wave of censors before the current one we're dealing with now, the reason why they were defeated was because Hollywood was getting involved. They actually succeeded in making laws that specifically targeted violent video games, and the video game industry successfully defended that in court by saying, why are these laws unfairly targeting us and not the movie and music industries? And then the censors had to back down, because if they continued the fight, they would have had to globally apply all the new laws they wanted to push to all forms of entertainment. And back then, Hollywood wasn't a complete shell of its former self. So Hollywood was starting to take notice, hey, wait a minute. You guys want to put extra restrictions on R-rated movies? Ha! So Hollywood was starting to spin up their own legal departments and their own banks to go at it. And then they backed down. Ultimately, that's the only reason the fucking Puritans left the video game industry alone the first time around. Because the video game industry was able to manipulate the courts into dragging the Hollywood into it. But they don't even have to do that anymore, because the industry itself is more than happy to bend over for every outrage mob that comes by. Yeah, remember back in the day when the industry, the media, and the fans stood together against the censors? Now it's the fans alone fighting against censorship that the industry and the media is championing.
Oh man, I am so excited to tell you guys right now that finally, after about a year of build-up and shilling, we have launched Blade Devil on Indiegogo, and so far it is doing so well thanks to awesome people like you. If you haven't backed it yet, then please check the links in the description and check out Blade Devil on Indiegogo. You will not be disappointed. Looking forward to seeing you there.